Welcome to Prediction News Update. I'm Chris Gerlacher with Prediction News, and we've got Barron's reporter Nick Devor here with us today to tell us about what the empty Chicago enforcement office means for the CFTC as it tries to police all of these new event contracts and other derivatives markets. Like this video to support us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Prediction News and follow us on X at Prediction News. Now let me tell you about Prediction Edge. The 2026 elections are going to be a wild ride. More than 450 House and Senate seats are up for grabs for incumbents and a new wave of rising candidates. Prediction Edge is a new election platform that brings together real-time prediction market prices, candidate profiles, fundraising, polling, and endorsement data. Prediction Edge really is the smarter way to follow the elections this year. Now I want to bring in Nick. Nick, take us back into the times before we had an empty Chicago office. What does a fully or properly staffed CFTC Office of Enforcement Attorneys do for the markets they police?
Yeah, so the CFTC handles a lot, and the Chicago office of the CFTC handled a lot of what the CFTC handles generally. So enforcement attorneys there are in the Division of Enforcement. The CFTC has a Division of Enforcement and it has a Division of Market Oversight. So when we talk about monitoring, surveillance, that kind of a thing, that's all in the Division of Market Oversight. Whereas the actual enforcing of the rules, going into courtrooms, arguing cases, that's all the Enforcement Division of Enforcement. And like I say, they handle a lot. So you've got market manipulation, disruptive trading. So that's things like spoofing, wash trading, cornering the market. They do complex fraud like Ponzi schemes, romance scams, pig butchering, Forex fraud, etc. Then there's also the regulatory and compliance violations that they handle. So they're making sure that market participants are reporting data on time. They're making sure there's good, that market participants have good supervision in place. And then there's things like the Bank Secrecy Act, ensuring crypto exchanges have anti-money laundering and know your consumer protections in place. That's actually what Changpeng Zhao, the CEO of Binance, that's what the CFTC got him on, was the Bank Secrecy Act. And that civil case against him was actually brought by attorneys in the Chicago office.
Mm-hmm. Why is the Chicago office so much more central to the CFTC Enforcement Division than some of the other offices around the country?
Yeah, so just for context, there's an office, the CFTC has an office in Chicago, New York, DC, and Kansas City. But the Chicago office, of course, had proximity to the Chicago Board of Trade and later the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which, of course, merged with the Board of Trade to form the CME Group. So, the history of commodities trading and futures and all of this stuff is tied up in Chicago. In the 1850s, that's where the global commodities market was born. And when the CFTC first started up in 1975, it had a big presence in Chicago because what it was regulating was taking place in Chicago. The way that the SEC has a big presence in New York because the NYSE and the NASDAQ are here, it's the same kind of thing. You need people who are local, right? And actually, the very first time that the CFTC exerted real muscular authority was in 1979. That was like 4 years after the CFTC first got up and running. And there was evidence that 3 separate groups of speculators were trying to corner the market on potatoes, coffee, and wheat. And that's all in like 10 days. The CFTC halted trading 3 times on the Chicago Board of Trade. And that really pissed off the Chicago Board of Trade because they were like, this is our show, get out of here, you little federal regulator. But, remember, the Chicago Board of Trade is like, at that time, one of the largest, if not the largest, commodities market in the entire world. And this little agency comes in and says, hey, there's things going on here. You guys need to cut it out. So the Chicago office was really instrumental in establishing and maintaining the kind of regulatory clout that the CFTC had. Yeah, and anyway, in recent years, they've been just as prolific. Again, like I said, they had that civil case against Binance and its founder that was litigated in a federal courthouse in Chicago. That's where that happened. And then the civil case against FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, Caroline Ellison, that case was heavily staffed with Chicago enforcement attorneys. And that FTX case actually resulted in the largest ever settlement for the CFTC. That was $12.7 billion that
Wow.
the CFTC successfully got from FTX, returned to customers. After that case happened, that case was in New York, but it was, again, heavily staffed with Chicago attorneys. And in a press release at the time in 2024, the director of the enforcement division, applauded the Chicago-based team, quote, for their tireless efforts on behalf of FTX's victims. So, the Chicago office just kind of had a reputation for taking on difficult and groundbreaking cases. A lot of the precedent that was set by the CFTC in the post-Dodd-Frank era, that was all cases that were run out of the Chicago office. At its peak, there were about 20 trial attorneys, 20 lawyers in the enforcement division. They have paralegals and investigators as well, but the main force was about 20 enforcement attorneys. And my reporting this week is that there are now none. On Friday, the second to last Friday, that's Friday, February 6th, the second to last enforcement attorney left. And then the following Monday, the last enforcement attorney put in their 2 weeks, had their access, revoked, got locked out of their email. So yeah, now in Chicago at that storied office where all of the heavy hitters were, there's now no enforcement attorneys. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not that there's no, the CFTC was quick to tell me that, of course, they still have enforcement staff. These people are still doing some regulating. It's just that the office that's connected to like the spiritual center of the commodities market now has no enforcers left. And those were the people that were really going after the difficult cases, really setting precedent. All of those people are gone. They were either hit with reductions in force or moved to other divisions of the agency or just pushed out by the toxic environment, according to my reporting, under Acting Chair Caroline Pham.
When did the exit of these attorneys really begin? How do we get from 20 to 0?
Yeah. So it started with the inauguration of Donald Trump for the second time in early 2025. On January 20th, on Inauguration Day, Caroline Pham, who had been a CFTC commissioner, was elevated to the acting chair role. Acting chairs across government agencies, typically you're just kind of like keeping the boat steady, right? You're not making too big changes. You're kind of just, it's a custodial role is the word, right? That is not how Caroline Pham did things. She basically immediately took up a campaign against what she called regulation by enforcement. So just so you guys understand, when we hear this term regulation by enforcement, and the now confirmed chair Mike Selig has used this term, we're talking about enforcement lawyers going beyond the letter of the law to go after market participants and establish, again, regulation by enforcement, right? According to the sources that I spoke to at the CFTC, and so your listeners have context, that was 6 people, former attorneys in the office and leadership officials. 4 of those people that I talked to worked in the CFTC's Chicago office under Caroline Pham. So when we have regulation by enforcement, that's not really happening, according to our sources. There's not a lot of politics happening inside the Chicago office of the CFTC, as far as I'm aware. This is not exactly a glamorous job to be an enforcement attorney. Right. So the people that are there are mostly there like for the love of the game, right? They want to just protect market participants. They want to just do their job. And so to say that they were, in their telling anyway, and we have to take them at their word, I guess, they don't think there was ever regulation by enforcement. They were following the law. They were doing what they were supposed to do, and prosecuting people in the way that they were supposed to. Anyway, so once Caroline Pham gets in, she has this campaign against enforcement, and one of the first things that she does is she closes about half of the open cases that the Division of Enforcement was working on. Just said no more. Some of them had been going on for a very long time. Again, litigation takes a while. But some of these cases, according to the sources that I spoke to, were closed without talking to the case teams, just like, we're not going to do this case anymore. It's been taking too long. And the lawyers that have been working on them for 10 years, are like, what the heck? And
Right.
then at one point in mid-July, July 15 or 16, I can't remember, there was reduction in force notices were sent out to 4 of the 5 chief trial attorneys at the Chicago office and the deputy director of the Division of Enforcement at the Chicago office. The 5th chief trial attorney had already taken up an offer to retire early, but those 6 people, the 5 chief trial attorneys and the deputy director, they had a combined 103 years of experience at the office of enforcement, right? And now all those people are gone, right? And so after those cuts, a lot of people felt like they were retaliated against, those chief trial attorneys, for doing their job too well in the eyes of Caroline Pham.
Catching too much fraud.
Yeah, catching too much fraud. You guys are going after it too hard. You're out. You're fired. That's basically how they feel it went down. And then after that,
I'm sorry, and she saw those as, why did she close those cases that she closed? Was that just more overreach in her view?
Yeah, I think she just saw them as overreach, or it was just that this is taking too long. We're holding people in litigation for too long. We're, driving, doing lawfare, that kind of a thing. And so those cases were just shut down. I wish I could tell you reasons why these cases were shut down, but the lawyers who were working them didn't get reasons, right? So they had no insight into why these things were closed. So yeah, after that happened, and after those reductions in force of the kind of top people at that office, the office felt very demoralized, and that's the word that a couple sources used to describe the office environment afterwards. And so, yeah, slowly there was just attrition. And I mean, even under Chair Selig, more people have left, right? So you kind of had this, acting chair come in and basically take an opposite stance to the entire mission of the Chicago office and the enforcement division. And, no one wants to work under that environment. So people left to go to private practice, people transferred to other divisions, people were fired, they were just kind of worn down. And now we're at a point where there's no attorneys left in Chicago.
What is lost by this emptied office now?
What is lost? Well, again, we still have enforcement attorneys, that there's still enforcement people working at the CFTC, but what's lost is decades of institutional experience. One person that I spoke to, one of the chief trial attorneys at the Chicago office who was laid off that July, he'd been there for 26 years, right? So just think about how much has changed in the commodities market in the last 26 years, right? And this is a person who's been there that entire time, bringing cases, establishing precedent, understanding how the office works, understanding how the CFTC works, how the law works. Just you can't replace that kind of deep knowledge and deep understanding of how to bring these cases, how to do this work. That's not something you can just hire somebody else to get up to speed on, right? So
I can't do that yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, I probably could not do that, on day one. I mean, these are like highly trained people, right? These are people that have been doing this. And the guy who I talked to who'd been there for 26 years, he was like, yeah, I thought I was going to be there another 10 or 15 years. This is that when people get to these jobs and they like it, it's the terminus, right? This is what they're going to do until their career is over, because they love it. These people are really passionate about the law, about protecting market participants, about enforcing the rules. And, those are, I mean, whether or not, this is where this story gets kind of interesting to me. Like, if you're like an anti-regulation person, if you want the CFTC to be bringing less cases, surely you want some people there, right? Like you would want like at least 5 lawyers at the Chicago office. I don't know what the number is, but like certainly we don't want there to be nobody there, right? in terms of like what's lost on like a material level, if the CFTC has to file an emergency motion in Illinois federal court, they're going to have to fly somebody from New York or DC. There's no one there who can do that right now, right? So that's kind of the place that we're at. So, I mean, there's still going to be enforcement. Things are still going to happen to some extent, but it's going to take a lot longer. The pursuit of bad actors has already been slowed. And just to close the loop here, the attorney that I spoke to had been there for 26 years. One of the things he said to me is that, he sometimes jokes that, quote, if I was a different person, I would start a crypto scam right now because there's no cops on the beat, right? So as a journalist, when you get a quote like that, you're like, is this person being hyperbolic? Like, do they really mean that? Do they just want to be dramatic? Do I, as a reporter, just like that because it's an incredible quote and it's going to make a great end to the article? All of those things may be true, but again, this is a person who has deep, deep knowledge of the markets and the CFTC, and he's saying that right now is the best time to launch a crypto scam because of all of the enforcement knowledge and experience that has been lost.
Michael Selig responded to your article implicitly. We're talking Friday the 13th. We were going to talk yesterday, the 12th, until his Odd Lots episode came out and blew up your Thursday. He responded that, one, you're a little bit of fake news, but only a little bit. Only a little. He's also said that they're hiring elsewhere in the agency. They're using AI tools. How do his answers impact the enforcement issues and the gaps that you uncovered in your reporting?
Well, I mean, the AI thing is a little bit of a head fake because, again, AI can't file emergency motions or represent market participants in court, right? You can't replace these people just easily, quickly, or with the large language model. It just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So, yeah, I mean, it's true what he says that there's other division of enforcement attorneys, but again, these are the best of the best that we have lost, right? So certainly, I want my regulators to be the best. If there's going to be regulation of my markets, I want the people that are doing it to be the ones that are really good at it and have been doing it for a long time. So, I mean, I guess we'll see. One of the sources that I spoke to, who is a former leadership official at the CFTC, he said that, there's something about being in that chair that makes you want to bring a lot of enforcement actions, right? You get to be the chair of the CFTC and you're like, all right. Like, let's go after some bad actors, right? It makes you feel like you're doing your job, etc. So, I mean, we'll see. It's still early days of Chair Selig's administration. I don't know what his, enforcement regime will look like. That remains to be seen, I think. And, whether or not he goes after bad actors with the alacrity of previous administrations, it remains to be seen. And, I don't want to judge too early on that, but we'll see. We'll see as time goes.
What kinds of new enforcement questions have event contracts and prediction markets put on the CFTC's radar that the Chicago office is not going to be able to respond to in real time as perhaps they may need to?
Yeah, so prediction markets raise a lot of interesting questions, right? At their base, they're still futures contracts, right? So there's been questions about whether the CFTC has the expertise or the experience or the knowledge necessary to, the CFTC regulates corn markets. How can they go after, insider trading on NBA games, right? At the base, these are still bad actors in regulated markets doing things on regulated platforms. If it's happening on like a Kalshi instead of a poly market, right? If it's happening on poly market, everyone's just screwed. But if it's happening on Kalshi, like they can follow procedure, right? They can say, okay, this looks fishy. Let's do some interviews. Let's freeze some accounts. Let's make things happen. but the capacity to do that speedily has been reduced. There are fewer people at the CFTC to do the work of the CFTC. Therefore, the work will go slower, right? Mm-hmm. So, prediction markets raise a lot of interesting questions about insider trading, and I think the CFTC is going to be able to handle those. And a lot of the time, the exchanges themselves have to do much of the monitoring, right? Kalshi has, in the same way that contracts are self-certified, the exchanges are monitored by the exchange themselves at the same time, right? If there's bad things happening on Kalshi's exchange, Kalshi is responsible for making sure that doesn't happen anymore. And if they don't, that's when the CFTC is like, hey guys, what are you doing? Right. So if the exchanges, lax up on their responsibilities, that's when the CFTC steps in. But again, to what degree are they able to step in? Right. How much appetite does the Selig CFTC have to do that kind of work, to go after these kinds of people? That's the question that is still open. The question that's not open is how quickly will they be able to do it? They'll not be able to do it as quickly. There's less people. There's less expertise, right? So,
well, that speed is going to be funky too. You can go 4 years between a complaint being finally announced and an actual fine.
Yep.
And if you take something like the Nobel Prize Insider on Polymarket, which I know is not CFTC regulated, but these are the same questions. If you see an enormous price spike, you have to be able to tell whether that's a legitimate insider or whether that's a very clever trader. How would even a properly staffed CFTC be able to build confidence that they can police on the faster timescales that prediction markets demand?
Man, that is a great question. We'll see. I mean, a lot of this stuff, we're still so, I think, we're on a podcast called Prediction News. I write about prediction markets. Everyone on Twitter is talking about prediction markets. We forget that in the timeline of, the CFTC's existence and the commodities market's existence, this stuff is brand new, right? We're still figuring this stuff out. We're still going to see how long it takes, what it looks like for the CFTC to actually prosecute a bad actor in this space. The CFTC, to my knowledge, has not, there's no cases have been closed on insider trading on prediction markets yet, right? So I don't know. We'll see how long it takes and how quickly they're able to move. But again, does the Selig CFTC have the appetite for that? I don't know. We'll find out.
Looking ahead to a new administration, which feels like an eternity now in a fast-moving space like this, but what does the CFTC look like in a few years when it's back in an enforcement mood and it's properly staffed and ready to go begin really prosecuting white-collar crime again at the scale that it was even 2 years ago?
I can't say for sure what things will look like in the future, but I can tell you a little bit about what they look like inside the CFTC right now.
Let's do it.
So we can understand a little bit of how they would maybe do something. So one of the changes that Acting Chair Caroline Pham made was, when you worked at the CFTC as an enforcement lawyer, you had your hands in a bunch of pies, right? Maybe you're working on a complex fraud case, and while you're waiting for that case, you have to interview some experts. While you're waiting for those experts to get back to you, maybe you bang out a quick registration violation case in the meantime, right? You have the ability to kind of move between cases and do a lot of stuff. One of the case changes that Caroline Pham made, according to my sources, is she got rid of all of the middle management, streamlined things. And now CFTC enforcement is divided into complex fraud and retail fraud. These are the two things that the CFTC is looking at. So according to my sources, what that looks like in practice is the complex fraud team is kind of twiddling their thumbs while the retail fraud people are drowning, right? Complex cases take a long time. You have to get leads for the cases, which aren't always easy to come by. You have to talk to experts. You have to interview witnesses, et cetera, right? And again, maybe you have a lot of time in between developments. These are complex cases, right? We're looking at, crypto exchanges, anti-money laundering, all this stuff that takes a long time to get right. And in the past, maybe those attorneys who are working those complex cases get to, do some other things in the meantime. But now that division is split up, right? And so you have people who are on complex cases have lots of time in between what they need to do, whereas people who are working retail have a lot of things on their plate. And again, there's fewer people to do all of the work, right? So when you have fewer people to do the job, everything just takes longer. And, as I said before, the pursuit of bad actors has already been slowed, right? These things are already taking longer than they would have before. So I don't know if Chair Selig is going to ask for more resources, ask for more attorneys. He says he's hiring. So I guess, there's some appetite to staff up a little bit more, but there were a lot of cuts under Caroline Pham. And, if the CFTC can get back up to staff, then, maybe we'll be back in the position we were a few years ago where there's heavier enforcement. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite for that across this presidential administration and other places. If you look at what just happened with the EPA today, right, you've got a lot of not regulation, a lot of people who are not interested in regulation. And I think that Selig was probably chosen because he fit a particular mold that the administration is looking for. So will there be more enforcement in years to come? Again, open question.
And this is all before the crypto legislation gets passed and the CFTC formally gets its crypto mandate.
Yeah. I mean, one of the lawyers I spoke to, the quote was, if the agency gets crypto jurisdiction, we're woefully understaffed to handle it. Like, well, that's not good, right?
Start your crypto scam now.
Yeah, I mean, get moving, guys. You heard it here first.
Launch that meme coin.
Just kidding. Allegedly. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see, right?
Well, Nick, thanks so much for stopping by and breaking this down for us.
Yeah.
Where can we follow you in your reporting?
You can follow me on X. I'm at Nick Devor _. Or you can find me at barrons.com. That's BARRONS.com. I'm there. We have a website. We publish every day. I cover the gambling industry, prediction markets, and if you live in New York or another major population center, you may even be able to find Barron's print magazine. If you want to, relive the old days of reading the newspaper, you can read Barron's in print. We're out there, so find me there.
We'll be following. Make sure and give this video a like to support us. Follow or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Prediction News to make sure you can get more interviews like these, and follow us on X at Prediction News to get our breaking news coverage. Nick, thanks again for stopping by.
Thanks, Chris. See you next time.